Thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate it. Everybody having a good day today? You guys wide awake? Everybody feeling good? Yeah, ready for back to school? You're like, we were having this conversation earlier about is August fall or summer? And I think somebody said it depends on where you live. And I was like, that is the most accurate answer to that question, possibly. Because if you live in Texas, it is definitely still 100% summer. If you live in the anywhere north of here, it feels a little more like fall probably, but not here at the moment. But I was telling Jessica, it's kind of crazy. Walking out this week, I was like, man, it's like 110-ish or whatever it is. I don't even know. I don't even keep up anymore. I'm like, it's 100 plus. And I was thinking, how crazy is it that in like 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be wearing light jackets? Like, that's so wild. Like you get around that mid-September time, and it's like in the mornings and in the evenings, you're like in a light jacket or in a hoodie. And it's like, how do we go from that to that quickly? Just part of living in North Texas, I guess. So anyway, enough about the weather. I hope that you're having a great weekend so far. My name is Aaron, and I'm glad that you're here today. A couple of things I want to just highlight before we get started today. Number one is if you were here last week, or if you weren't here last week, we had a student takeover, and all of our teenage interns took over service, and they ran the whole thing last week, and they did an incredible job. Yeah, clap for them. So awesome. They did a great job with that, so just a huge shout out to them for what they did, and they put together a lot of work and a lot of time into that, and they did a great job communicating God's word and leading in worship. They just did so good. And then I want to highlight on this Tuesday, we're getting the opportunity as a church to host Petrolia's Petrolia High School and elementary school's all staff event. It'll be here in this room. And last year was kind of a last minute thing because of some issues that were going on. And the AC actually broke down at the school that morning. And they were like, hey, can we shift? And we were like, yeah, we made it work. And it happened. And it was cool. And then this year they were like, hey, can we come back and just do it there again? And I was like, that would be awesome. So we want to host them well. If you're interested, it'll be from 8. The time frame that we're going to be here is going to be from about 8 o'clock Tuesday morning till about 8:45 on Tuesday morning. If you're interested in helping host that event, we need about 10 people. I would love to have a couple of families here. We have some fun things. I don't want to spoil it because there's a bunch of teachers in the room, but we have some fun things we want to do for our teachers. So if you have young kids and you would like to be a part of that for about 45 minutes, if you could just let me know after service, come find me in the lobby or shoot me a text. We'd love to be able to have a handful of people help us with that because we want to host our staff, our teachers and stuff really, really well, knowing that they're some of the most influential people in our entire community. They're influencing teenagers and kids and preschool kids, and they're pouring into them all year long. And so we want to host them well and kick off the year right for them. And so it's going to be a fun day as they have their all staff here, and we're able to host them. So if you're interested in that, Tuesday morning, please let me know. I'd love to be able to have you here for that. Also, I want to give kind of a warning. Don't do this too often, but if you have elementary age kids in the room today, I want to give you kind of a warning that today's topic and the content is going to be pretty PG-13. If you want to send them to kids ministry, now would be the time to do that. If you're like, I'm totally cool with them being here, and you want to have some conversations that might be a little awkward later, that's totally fine as well. But I want to just give that preface to you today. To let you know. Some of you looked at your kids that are like in their 20s and were like, I don't know, should we have this conversation? It's part of it. Well, hey, my parents are in the room. I think they're somewhere around here. So I'm preaching a topic with them, knowing that they're going to listen to it. So that's just part of it. But Romans chapter 7, verse 15, like Jeremy said, we're in week 7, which is crazy. We don't normally do series that are this long, but we just really feel like these are some things that we really need to talk about. Things that our culture needs to talk about. And so Romans chapter 7, verse 15, kick off week 7. We've been in this verse for every week of it. It says this. Paul says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. But if I know what I'm doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law is good. So I'm not the one doing wrong. It is the sin living in me that does it. And I know that nothing good lives in me. That's really hopeful, Paul. Thank you for that. That is in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. And we've been talking through this whole series about how there are things inside of all of us that, man, we just don't want. We don't want to do them, but we keep going back to them. over and over again. And a lot of times they're sinful things that we know they're sinful, or we think they're probably not at least morally right, or maybe they're unethical, but we keep going back over and over and over again. Why do we do that? And we're trying to answer this question about different things, and we've called this series Achilles because a lot of times it's the small things, the little things, like the arrow that took out Achilles' heel. It's the little things in our lives, the things that don't seem like a big deal, or maybe they're more private things. It's those little things that we think aren't a big deal, but later on they end up taking us out. They're things that eventually take us out. And so our series' big idea is we cannot stop a bad habit. We can only replace it with a good one. And I've joked that you can also replace a bad habit with another bad habit, so be careful with that. But for our context, we're saying, hey, if you want to stop something in your life, if you want to remove something in your life that you're like, I just keep going back to it, you're going to have to replace it with something good. And so I want to pray for us today, and I'll just be honest, this topic is a topic that can come off as being a topic that is difficult. It's a topic that can come off as being one that maybe even seems a little self-righteous. And let me just say, I'm not coming from that perspective at all. If anywhere, I'm coming from the deepest place of grace ever with this topic, and I'll explain a little bit about that why in a minute. But I want to pray and ask God to speak to us through his word today. God, we love you, and we just ask that as we look at Achilles, our Achilles week 7 week, God, I pray that God, you would speak to us this morning, that God, your word would be real to us. It would challenge us, it would change us, and God, that it would help us to be someone different on Monday than we were today when we walked in on Sunday. And we love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So last week's message, the girls that spoke up here last week, they did an incredible job, by the way. They talked about replacing entitlement with gratitude. Replacing entitlement with gratitude. And entitlement seems like one of those things that it just is so normal in our culture. It's so normal. I find myself feeling entitled. Every time I stand in a checkout line at any store, I'm like, why am I in line? I should be at the front of this line. Anytime I'm trying to buy something, or where it really gets you is when you're trying to return something. The entitlement of like, you are going to take this back. You know, that moment of like, that there's entitlement. And the girls did a great job of teaching about replacing entitlement with gratitude. And as we look to today's Achilles heel, it's an ancient war that although Satan has weaponized modern tools to attack people, it's an ancient war, but Satan has weaponized these modern tools to attack people with this ancient problem. It destroyed Samson, and it almost took David completely out. It's something that, just to be completely transparent and honest with, for a season of my life, it was my Achilles heel. For a season of my life, it was something I struggled with and I had to deal with, and I had to realize that, man, this is something that I have to shift inside of me, that God had to do inside of me and help me to overcome. We believe that the church should be a place where we can talk about anything. I don't want to be a church that answers questions that people aren't asking. I want to be a place that people come and the difficult questions, the hard questions, the things that people go, man, what does the Bible actually say about this? I want to be able to answer and have conversation around those questions because the Bible has a lot to say about a lot of different things. And what I've discovered is that whether you're single in the room, whether you're married in the room, whether you're young, whether you're old, we all face this Achilles heel. And this Achilles heel is the Achilles heel of lust. Today, as our big idea, I want us to replace lust with self-control. I want to replace lust with self-control. If you're wondering, what is lust? It's like not a word we just throw around a lot, really. Like, what exactly is that? Lust, if you look up in the dictionary, it's defined as an intense longing, usually intense or unbridled sexual desire. So can you have lust for something other than sex? And the answer to that is, yeah, absolutely you can. But for today's purposes, we want to look at it from the specific realm of sexual desire. Lust after sexual things. And honestly, just being transparent, I used to think that lust was something that teenage guys dealt with. Just being honest. As I've gotten a little older and a little more mature, I realized that lust is no respecter of gender, and it's no respecter of age. It's something that well over the majority of people struggle and deal and battle with. I used to think that it was something that wasn't really. It was something that was very private and only a few people dealt with. As I've gotten older, I realized not true at all. If you're going, man, I don't know, Aaron, I don't know if I agree with you on that. I'm going to give you a few just quick stats. I'm not really a big stats person, but I want to give you a few quick stats to kind of hopefully bring the severity of this topic to our forefront really quick. The average age that someone is introduced to internet porn is 11 years old. A lot of studies show it's actually be 8 years old, but the consensus at this point is at 11 years old. 90% of kids age 8 to 18 have viewed pornography online. 90%. Pornography equates to nearly half of internet activity on a daily basis. And 91% of men and 60% of women have viewed porn in the last month, according to a 2020 study. In all the study that I was doing for this, I ran across this quote, and it kind of shook me, especially having a new baby in my life. This quote shook me like crazy. The quote is this: if we don't disciple our kids about sexuality, porn will do it for us. And as I thought about that, and I thought about all the conversations I've had over the years around this topic of lust and around this topic of sexuality, I realized that the number one educator of most of the people in my life that I've had this conversation about has been pornography. As a church, as a leader, I'm not okay with that. The Bible has a lot to say about sexuality, has a lot to say about this topic, and I want this to be a place that we can come around and go, hey, we're going to have a conversation about something that, honestly, almost every one of us deal with. And every one of our kids are going to deal with it. And so let's talk about it openly, and let's have a real biblical conversation around this topic. Although it might seem like it's a small thing, it's just a little thought. Maybe it's a private thing that's not hurting anybody. That's the way we view it. It's something that no one else really knows about. The truth is that it's deteriorating your soul, and make no mistake, it's affecting your current and your future relationships. There's no doubt about it. There's enough secular research out there to know it is destroying people's mental health. It's destroying people's relational connections. It's causing all kinds of things. You don't have to look very far to be able to determine the negative effects that lust has on our physical, mental, and social selves. And you don't have to look into Christian studies. You can look at secular studies, and it's all over the place. The secular world has defined pornography as the new drug. Not the Christian world. The secular world has defined it that way. And so when we talk about this topic, I want you to know there's no shame coming towards you today. I want to have an open and honest conversation. I want to help you to be able to go, how do I battle this? Should I battle it? Our culture's made lust a normal thing. It's just a normal thing to joke about that person. It's just a normal thing to say something about this person. It's a normal thing to look at these things. It's just a normal thing is the way our culture has treated it. But I want to look at it from a biblical perspective. Should it be a normal thing? Or should it be something that we fight back against? So how do we keep lust from taking us out like that arrow that took out Achilles' heel? Because here's the thing. Although it seems like it's not that big of a deal, it's private, no one maybe knows about it, it's not a big deal. It's just these thoughts that are happening in my head. No one even knows what's happening in my head. If they did, they'd be scared, right? Some of you are like, for real? No one even knows. The truth is that eventually those thoughts lead to actions. Those thoughts, they determine a lot about our future. And so today, as we talk about this, I'm going to give you a couple thoughts that can help us kind of maybe shape our view and how we combat this topic of lust. So the first one is this: we have to understand God's design. We have to understand God's design. As I've talked with people over the years about sexuality and different things, the truth is most people don't understand God's design. They don't understand what the Bible even says about it. They don't ever go look up what the Bible says about it. They heard what Aunt Sally's cousin's friend said about it, and they just believed it. And they never went and looked it up for themselves to determine, well, what does the Bible actually say about it? And so today I want us to look at some scripture and what the Bible actually says about it. In case you didn't know this or you never thought about it, God created sex. Praise God for that. We could have a moment of worship right there. Just thank you, God, for that, right? I know that Satan tries to mark it like it's his thing, but it wasn't. He didn't create it. He didn't invent it. He just twisted it and turned it and lied about it so that it would become this thing that was destructive. But the reality is that God created it. When he created Adam and Eve, he gave them this gift, and he said, hey, this is for you guys. He gave them this gift, and honestly, we live in a culture that makes it seem like this isn't God's idea at all, but the reality is that God created it. And in order to protect us from it, because like any powerful thing, in order to protect us from it, God had to give us clear boundaries so that we wouldn't destroy ourselves with this amazing gift that he gave us. In Proverbs chapter 5, verse 15, it says this. It says, drink water from your own well. Share your love only with your wife. Why spill the water of your springs in the streets, having sex with just anyone? Some of you didn't even know the word sex was in the Bible. It's there lots of times, okay? Verse 17, you should reserve it for yourselves. Never share it with strangers. I think that in those times, it specifically was talking about other physical people. I think you can translate that into our culture, and strangers being images online, videos online. It could be other people, it could be thoughts, it can be all kinds of things. But where do we unwrap this gift, though? Where are we able to use it biblically speaking? The only place that we see that this gift or this idea of sex is to be used is within the context of marriage between a husband and wife. We see that all throughout Scripture, both Old and New Testament. The only place it's to be used is between a husband and wife. So today I brought, anybody in here like a good fire in a fireplace? Not right now, I know, but like when it's cold outside, in the actual fall. So I brought a little bit of firewood. I'm a firewood guy. I know some people have gas stoves and things, and man, they're cool, but like there's just something cool about burning some firewood. Like the smell of wood, it's just awesome. So if I was going to create or build a fire in my house, there's really one place I should build it, and that place is in a fireplace or in a smoker if you want to make some really good food, okay? But in a fireplace is pretty much the only place I should put it. When I think about that, when you put the fire in a fireplace, it provides warmth, it's beautiful, it smells good, it's got all these incredible things that come along with it that are just awesome. But if I build that same fire in the middle of my living room outside of a fireplace, what tends to happen to my home? Burn it down. Let me just say, lust is very similar. Within the correct context of marriage, it provides some incredible benefits of warmth and connection and beauty. It can provide children. It can provide all kinds of things. But outside of that context of marriage, if we let it run wild in our living room, it's going to burn down our lives. And although it might seem like this incredibly private thing and this thing that no one really knows about or only me and one other person know about, the reality is that it could burn down your whole life. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16, Paul speaks to this. I'm going to read this in a translation of the Bible called The Message. It's actually a paraphrase or a commentary. But I want to read it because I think it's so good the way that Eugene Peterson says it. He says, there's more to sex than mere skin to skin. Sex is so much a spiritual mystery as a physical fact. As written in Scripture, the two become one. And since we want to become spiritually one with the Master, we must not pursue the kind of sex that, catch this line, that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more alone than ever. We shouldn't pursue the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more alone than ever. The kind of sex that can never become one. There's a sense in which sexual sins are different from all others. In sexual sin, we violate the sacredness of our own bodies, and these bodies that were made for God-given and God-modeled love for becoming one with another. He says, man, this is the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy. Just this lust that's for someone other than your spouse. It's a void. It's going to leave you void and lonely. And Paul's pretty clear about that all throughout all of his letters. But when we use the word lust in our culture, oftentimes we just think of pornography and that's it. That's kind of where we go, our minds go, because that's our culture. In our culture, pornography really refers to like sexual images or videos online. That's the typical, like if you're going to refer to something being pornographic, it's something online that is a visual image or a video. That's kind of where we go. But if you go back to the New Testament and you look up the word that we get the word pornography from, the word is actually porneia. It'll be up on the screen. It's from the Greek language. And that word, which is used most of the time when talking about sex in the New Testament, actually means any sexual activity outside of marriage. It is not just number one, they didn't have the internet, okay? So it's not referring to pornography the way we understand pornography. They're referring to anything sexual outside of marriage as being pornographic, as being porneia. And when we look at this topic from that lens, it really shifts the way that we read a lot of these verses. Really is saying anything that's causing us even to visualize or think about someone who is not our spouse is porneia. Whether I'm dating them, whether they're just some random person that I saw online, whether they're somebody I met in public, whether they're somebody in my classroom, whatever it is, like any sexual activity outside of marriage. So if we understand God's view of sexuality, we know God, it was a gift that he gave to us. Thank God for that. But then he said, hey, this gift is a powerful gift. I want you to use it inside of this context with these barriers. And if you will, it's going to be powerful, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be great. But if you get it outside of these, it has the potential to burn your house down. If you get it outside of these boundaries that I'm giving you spiritually and biblically, then it has the potential to really destroy your relationships. It has the potential to destroy your mind. It has the potential to destroy your heart. It has the potential, even what we know now about a lot of studies, it has the potential to destroy your health. It has the potential to destroy all kinds of things. I'm not going to get into the health side of it, but it's crazy interesting how many health-related issues are tied back to lust. So we got to understand God's design. The second thing, if we're going to combat this and battle with this Achilles heel, is this. We have to confess sin at the thought level. Man, I did not grow up understanding this. Maybe it was taught to me and I just forgot it. I don't know. I never really remember hearing people talk about it at all, honestly. But the more I've started to understand and practice and think about this and study this, I'm like, God, this is so good. If we begin to confess sin at the thought level, it keeps us from having to confess sin at the action level. If I go to someone and confess whenever it's just a thought, it keeps me a lot of times from acting on that thought and then having to go and confess for the action and the sin that I have done already. Even with God, like God knows our thoughts, but oftentimes we wait till we've done something and then we go, God, I really messed up. God's like, I know you did. I saw your thoughts 3 weeks ago. So why don't in that moment we just go to God and say, God, I'm thinking about pursuing whatever it is. I'm lusting. I have this thought in my head. I want to confess it to you, and then I'm going to go confess it to somebody else that I trust. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so that way we can get ahead of it. Because every action that we take, whether it's good or bad, begins with a thought. Every action we take, whether good or bad, begins with a thought. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, Jesus speaks to this. And he says, you have heard that it is said, you shall not commit adultery. One of the 10 Commandments. But Jesus goes on in verse 28, he says, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus, like my thoughts? Really? Like I can't even think about it? Like I can't even look at someone and just have it in my mind? And Jesus says, no, that's lust. And our culture has so normalized it that we don't even see it as that. It's just part of life in American culture, not even just American culture. It's just part of life. We're sexual beings. We're created sexually, so we just get to do what we want to do and say what we want to say and look at what we want to look at and think about what we want to think about, and we don't have any consequences to it, but that's not the biblical stance. Jesus says that you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Ralph Waldo Emerson says this. He says, the ancestor of every action is a thought. The ancestor of every action is a thought. So why not go back to the source of where things start, and let's start right here in the thought. If we can capture it there, confess it there, we can get way ahead of the actions that follow. See, here's the thing. No one ever gives in to sexual temptation or engages in an affair or pulls up porn on their phone without first thinking about it. No one ever it just happened. When people say that, I'm like, you fell together. It was perfect. Like you just ran into each other. You turned the corner and just said, well, everything happened. Like, no, you thought about it first. I know I'm making light of it because I know this is like a topic that can be a little bit like, I have to be careful with words. It's almost like touchy, but that's a terrible word to use in that moment. It's a topic that can be a little bit heavy. We'll use that word, heavy. Again, no shame coming your way. I want us to have an understanding of it from a biblical perspective. And I want to know, how the heck do we fight this thing? Because it's just coming at us from every direction. Every direction. I'll talk about that more in a minute. We have to confess sin at the thought level. Here's the thing. Before we get the chance for it to become an action, if we confess it to God, ask for forgiveness for the thought, and then we go to another person. You guys are like, whoa. I can confess to God because then no one knows. But another person? James 5:16 tells us, confess your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Forgiveness happens between you and God. This is forgiveness between me and God. When I confess to God, he forgives me of my sin. Healing happens when I confess to other people around me. Obviously, don't post it on Facebook. I had this thought today. Don't do that. Bad idea, okay? But like, find some people who are in your life that are followers of Jesus, that have some spiritual maturity about them, that you can call, text, show up and say, hey, I've been having this thought. And it might, honestly, this isn't just a lust thing. This is literally any sin in your life that you're just like, I'm having this thought. Maybe like, hey, I'm having this thought about cheating on my taxes. I just need to confess. I'm having the thought. I don't want to do it, but I'm having the thought, okay? Maybe that's the thought. You just need to confess it, run it by them, and they're like, hey, that's sinful. No, don't do that. Or maybe you're having the thought like, hey, I've been thinking about this coworker, man. She's really attractive. He's really attractive. I've been thinking about them a lot recently, and I haven't done anything, but I've just been thinking about it a lot. And they can go, okay, well, let's talk about it. Number one, that right there, you're crossing the line. You need to confess and ask God for forgiveness. Number two, let's pray that God would help you to be able to have some self-control. Replace that lust with self-control. And I know if you look at me like I'm crazy, like, oh, that's a crazy thought, Aaron. Who would ever have that thought? And the reality is that probably every single one of us in the room have had that thought at least once in our lives. And we've had to capture that thought and take it to God and take it to somebody else and go, no. I'm committed to someone else in my life. Or I'm not committed to anybody in my life, but one day I hope to be committed to somebody in my life. So I'm going to take that thought captive. An example of this would be like, hey, the other day, you would go up this. I'm going to help you to know how to say this, okay? So this is how this plays out, to where it's not this weird moment of like you going, I got to tell you, we turn around so I can just like say it to your back of your head. This is how you do this, okay? So it'd be like, here's an example for you to use. Like, say you have this thought, you're driving down the road, and you have this thought, so then you're like, oh, I got to go confess that. So you go to your friend, and you're like, hey, the other day I was driving down the road, I had this thought about this person. You don't have to tell the person. I had a thought about another person that's not my spouse or who's someone I'm not married. I'm single. I had this thought about this. I thought about going to this website that I used to visit a long time ago. I thought about chasing down this reel that I watched on Instagram. I thought about whatever it is. And I just want you to know that that's lust inside of my head and my thought life. And I want to confess that to you so I can be forgiven and so I can experience healing. Will you pray with me during this? Will you help me? Will you pray for me to be able to battle this? The first time you do it, it's weird. It's a little strange because you've never done it before. You never had that conversation before. And you're laying everything out there on the line. You're being vulnerable with someone, and you're just confessing something that no one else knows about. It's only in your head. But that's where we get ahead of the actions, is if we confess it at the thought level. If you get in the habit, Jonathan Pogluta in his book says this, if you get in the habit of confessing sin at the thought level, you will learn to capture those thoughts. Confess and ask for prayer. It's a battle of the mind. Lust is a battle of the mind. We think it's physical. The reality is it all starts right here. And then it becomes physical, but it all starts right here. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, Paul speaks to this, and he says, we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts, and we teach them to obey Christ. You have two options whenever lust enters into your mind. You can either capture it and execute it, or you can entertain it. You can either capture it and execute it. Don't capture it, put it in a little cell in the back of your head and be like, oh, we'll just leave you there for a little bit. Execute it, murder it, get rid of it. If you let it have a cage in your head for a little bit, it's going to grow and it's eventually going to come back. That thought about that person, that your neighbor, your coworker, that thought about that girl that you think is so fine in math class, that thought that's there, that you just let it, I just think about it every once in a while, that you just let be there, let me tell you, that thought will eventually grow into a monster in your head. It'll consume your thought life. And Paul's saying you can either entertain these thoughts, and they're going to lead to sin, or you can capture them and execute them. So we have to take these thoughts, these lustful thoughts, we have to take them captive, we have to execute them. Because here's the thing about sexual desire. Sexual desire is not wrong. Levi Lusko says this, sex drive is not bad, but letting sex drive is bad. Sex drive is from God. Your sex drive is from God. That is incredible that God would do that for us. But letting sex drive is a bad idea. A bad idea. We can look at the life of Samson and quickly realize, bad idea. We can look at the life of David, one of the greatest leaders of all time, quickly realize, bad idea. He let sex drive when it came to Bathsheba, and Bathsheba's on the rooftop, and he's going, gosh, she's so good looking. Somebody's got to bring her to me. And he goes and he sends off and he brings her back. And what happens in that, not only does he commit adultery with her, but then he has her husband murdered. because he's the king and he can do what he wants. And then he hides and covers up that because there's a pregnancy that's happened, and now he has a baby who's being born, and he loses a child because of it, and all these different things. Like, there's a lot of things that happen all because it started as a thought. So we have to either control our sexual desires or be controlled by them. And honestly, in our culture, they're just like, be controlled by them. Our culture and what it's telling all of us, including our teenagers and our kids, is that's normal. Feel what you want to feel. Do what you want to do. Be controlled by the sexual desires that you have. And there was a season in my life where, honestly, I believe that. It's just part of growing up. It's just part of being a teenager. It's part of being a young man. It's part of being a... The problem is I started realizing this doesn't end. It doesn't end. I'm talking like 70, 80 years old, people still battling with the same thing they were battling when they were 15. Okay, hang on a second. This isn't a teenage guy problem. This is a humanity issue. And the Bible says a lot about it. So why not talk about it? I want to give you the third one today. If we're going to battle this, we have to remove access. Remove access. What do I mean by that? In his book that we've been kind of using as a framework for this series, the book's called Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do by Jonathan Pokluda. He uses this illustration of an elevator. And he says this. He says, often the question that I'm asked when it comes to sex, or really just sin, but the question that I'm asked when it comes to sex is, what can I do and still be okay? It's like the age-old question of every teenager in the world. I was that teenager as well, okay? What can I do? Like, where's the line? You know, like, I'm trying to be a follower of Jesus, but also, like, I think that she's really attractive. You know, like, where is that line? It's the age-old question. What can I do and get away with? How far can I go without sinning? And this question is like asking this. If I go to the top of this skyscraper, how close to the edge can I get without falling off? And Jonathan Pokluda has a brilliant answer to this. He says, I always ask the question when people ask me this. He said, I always ask the question is, do you want to jump or not? Do you want to jump off the edge, or would you rather stay on top of the building? And he says, if you want to jump off, go for it. Have fun. Absolutely, go for it. But if you're going, hey, I don't want to pursue this, I see the biblical side of it, that this is not good for my mental, social, physical health. I see that this is a sinful thing. I don't want to jump off. He says, then I would tell you this, don't even get on the elevator. Don't even get on the elevator. Because if you get on the elevator, you end up on the top of the roof. There's adrenaline. It's exciting. It's fun. And then all of a sudden you find yourself sending messages that you should have never sent. Checking on old boyfriends, girlfriends' accounts that you should never be on. Having a little bit too much of a flirty conversation with that coworker. You find yourself down this really slippery path really, really quick. But if you don't ever get on the elevator, you remove the access. And you're like, well, how do I do that? I'm going to give you some practical things. Let me be really blunt, by the way. How far is too far? You're like, Aaron, you've been pretty blunt. Maybe really blunt. How far is too far? When your body begins to prepare itself for sexual activity, you've gone too far. I won't get any blunter than that. I think we're all mature enough to understand what that means. When your body begins to prepare itself for sexual activity, you've gone too far. You've crossed that line. You're at the point of an action of lust. You're there. You're, and honestly, it's not even that. Besides all that, that's a terrible place to be. That's not fair to you. Stop putting yourself in those positions. Like, that's not fair to you to do that over and over and over to yourself or to this other person in your life or to the person that you're dating. Like, don't put yourself in the position where you're both like geared up and ready to go. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't do that anymore. Like, don't do that. It's like the worst thing ever to do that to someone. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3, Paul is talking to one of the most sexually charged cultures that we as humanity have ever known, honestly. He's talking to a culture in 1 Thessalonians that they practice all kinds of sexual sin, everything from pedophilia. There was no age of consent, so they practiced pedophilia. They practiced pretty much sex with anyone and anything that they could. It was a very sexually saturated culture. And Paul says these words to the Thessalonians when he says this, God's will for you is to be holy, so stay away from all sexual sin. Some other versions of that says flee from all sexual sin, but stay away from all sexual sin. In verse 4, he says, then each of you will control. In other words, we're going to replace lust with self-control. And then once you stay away from it, I love that Paul says this. Paul's the human. He's like, if you put yourself around it, you're not going to be able to be controlled. But if you will stay away from all sexual sin, then each of you will control his own body and live in holiness and honor, not in lustful passion like the pagans do, like the pagans who do not know God and his ways. And let me just say, when it comes to lust, whether it's sexting, foreplay, porn, one-night stands, a full-blown affair, anything that's happening outside of God's design, it's robbing you of the life that God designed for you. It's robbing you of it. In the culture that we live in, man, our culture doesn't believe that. I mean, you can listen to like 3 country songs, watch a Netflix movie, and you realize really quickly that this is not what our culture believes. They believe it's just totally normal and it's okay and it's not a big deal. It's just a thought level. Especially if it doesn't make it out of my thoughts, it's not a big deal at all. But Jesus and Paul over and over again, they're like, hey, this is a big deal. Hey, this is an Achilles heel that eventually is going to destroy you if you don't get some self-control. And Paul goes on and he says, hey, it isn't enough to just be like, I have self-control. You have to stay away from it. I always use the illustration, this is a very addictive thing, and we're going to talk about a little bit more of that in a minute. But I always use the illustration of like when someone is trying to become sober from being an alcoholic, you don't really want them hanging out in the bar. Like, not a good idea. Because they're trying to remove themselves. They have to remove access. Any 12-step plan you follow, anything you follow, one of the biggest things is remove access. And Paul's saying when it comes to sexual things, if you're battling lust all the time in your mind and you're acting on those things, you're going to have to be serious and get serious about removing access to those things. I'm going to give you some practical ways. How do we remove access? How do we remove access? Here's some practical boundaries. They're not going to be on the screen. If you want to take notes on them, write them down, type them out. That's fine. If you want them later, I'll give them to you, but they're not going to be on the screen. Some practical boundaries is no phone alone. No phone alone. If you have a teenager, let me just say, don't let them have their phone. Protect your kid by not letting them have their phone in their bedroom by themselves. Just protect them. Some of the teenagers got so mad at me when I said that. I love you enough to tell your parents that. Don't let them do it. Teach them how to use it wisely. Be wise about when they have it. Or at least have really, really, really good monitoring stuff on them. And if you think they're not smart enough to get around all the random apps and fire blocks and things that you have, let me tell you, they're way smarter than you on technology. They'll figure it out. They can hide it all from you in a million different ways, and it's not that difficult to figure out. No phone alone. If you're a person who's struggling with lust, and man, the truth is we carry our lust, wherever mine's at, we carry our lust devices around with us all the time. Am I anti-phones? No, I'm not anti-phones. Do I realize that there's so much access to so many things that if we're not very, very careful and if we're not spiritually mature enough to have this in our pocket to be able to stay away from the things that Paul's talking about when he says, hey, stay away from sexual sin, if we're not mature enough to stay away from it, then honestly, the truth is get yourself a flip phone. You think I'm kidding? You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. Some of you are like, I love the flip phone. Bring it back. No phone alone. Then another boundary would be you're never alone in a room with anyone of the opposite sex. Jessica and I, we practice this for years. Anytime that it happens, because it does happen randomly, like someone will stop by and one of us isn't home, or we'll have to have a meeting with someone, and we try to be very careful about having meetings in public places, or if someone just stops by the church and I'm here, I'll shoot her a text, hey, just so you know, this person stopped by. Just try to be on the up and up with that. Thankfully, we have cameras around our church, so I can stand in a spot where there's a camera. If you're ever like, why is Aaron randomly inching this way in our conversation? Just I'm trying to be wise. Here's the truth. Can I be real? I have to, in my strongest moments, I have to set up boundaries that will protect me in my weakest moments. If I don't, weak Aaron is terrible. Weak Aaron is weak. Weak Aaron does stupid stuff. So strong Aaron sets up boundaries to protect weak Aaron. And let me say, if you're gonna beat this thing, if you're gonna overcome this thing in your life, if you're gonna overcome lust or any addiction, this is an addiction, by the way. If you're gonna overcome, and there's plenty of research to prove that, if you're gonna overcome any addiction in your life, you have to remove access. So no phone alone, not alone in a room with someone of the opposite sex. If you're someone who struggles with homosexuality, not alone in a room with anyone. Just be wise. Give someone access, another boundary, give someone access to all of your devices. For some of you, this seems like the biggest invasion of privacy you've ever. It's like appalling that I even recommend that. Give someone access. Here's what I know. I listened to a parent talk about this one time, and I thought, so right. When someone's phone is on the table, and someone who should have access, like a parent to a child, has access, and the parent goes over and reaches for that phone, if that kid's like, no, you should probably definitely 100% look at that phone. If your spouse does it, you should probably definitely 100% look at that phone. Be gracious with them, but look at the phone. If your friend does it, who has given you the permission in their life to have access, 100% definitely look at the phone. Who has access to your phone? Give someone access to all of your devices, your phone, your laptop. Give someone access to your browsing history. Give someone access to your For You feed on all of your social media accounts. I heard someone this week talk about, in all my research, how used to we determine what people valued based on where they spent their money. Now we can determine what people value based on their For You feed and their social media apps. I was like, I'm going to look at my For You feed. And just to be completely honest, there were some things in my For You feed I had to go, not interested, hide, block. I had to do it. For most of us, there's probably accounts, there's another boundary. We need to unfollow accounts that cause us to lust. And the truth is, a lot of them probably aren't even what our culture would consider pornographic. But they're people, they're things, they're images, they're videos that they cause you to lust. And you know they cause you to lust. And you really just need to go and follow it, block it. There might be entire apps that some of you today need to shut down. There was a season in my life where I realized if I was going to chase after lust, this was the app I would go do it on. And it was a common social app. I won't say which one it was. Common social app. There was a season in my life where I realized if I'm going to go chase lust, I'm going to chase it right there. And I've literally had to get to the point of going, okay, I'm removing access. Delete the app. Off my phone. Delete it completely. Because I knew in the weakest moments, that's where I would chase it at. So I just had to delete it. Unfollow those accounts. There's another practical. Another practical will be remove or block accounts, reels, stories, movies. There's this great little feature on almost all your social feeds that is, normally it looks like 3 little dots, and you can click it, and it says not interested or unfollow or please don't send me content like this. Depending on which app you're on, there's that feature. The more that you can do, the less likely they're going to send you things that they know your appetite wants. Here's the thing about social media. They make money based on how long you stay on the app. I don't know if you knew that or not. Social media apps make money based on how long you stay on the app. Okay? The longer they can keep you on the app, the more money they make. Because the more ads they can push in front of you. And every time they push an ad in front of you, they make money off that ad. So they're sending you things that they think you want to see because they want to keep you on that app as long as possible. You're like, Aaron, are you serious? There's not many things I have like a little bit of a credibility for. I do have a marketing degree, so yeah, I'm serious about this one. Like have a little bit of credibility. They're keeping you on the app as long as they can because they make more money. So if they know that they can send you lustful things and they know that keeps you on the app, guess what they're going to send you more of? Lustful things. Over and over and over again. And they're like, how do they know? Just by your age, your gender, your marital status, there's a few little details, and they can start targeting you with things that they think you're going to want to see. And the more you engage those things, the more of those things they're going to send you. Another thing, and this is outside of technology, but another thing is if you're single in the room and you're going, man, how do I protect this? Let me just say, don't date if you don't have the intent to marry. Don't do it to yourself. If you don't have the intention of getting married in the next couple of years, then don't date. Jefferson Bethke, who has a lot to say about this topic, he has this quote. He says, dating with no intent to marry the other person is like shopping with no money. Either you're going to leave frustrated or you're going to take something that doesn't belong to you. Who likes to go shopping with no money? No one in the history of the universe wants to go shop with no money. Like, I just want to window shop. Window shopping just gets you in trouble because you end up just being frustrated that you can't buy the thing that's there, or you take it because you want it. And he explains that dating without the intent to marry is that way. When we just go, I just want to have this little relationship, this little side thing. I just want to. I'm not ever interested in marrying this person. It's just like my friend with benefits. Never ends well. Ever ends well. Say that one more time. Friends with benefits never ends well. Ever. Never ends well. We end up in situations where lust begins to control us. And this is the truth. A lot of times people say, when I have this conversation a lot, by the way. And I lived this for a season of my life. So I get it. A lot of times when people say, hey, I can't stop lusting. I can't stop looking at whatever that thing is. I can't stop going to this website. I can't stop viewing this person in this way. I can't stop whatever it is. Really, in reality, what they're really saying is it required such a drastic change in my life that it was too difficult for me to do. It was going to require me to have to get a flip phone. Not doing that. And let me just say, your future marriage, your current marriage, your future kids, your current kids, your grandkids will thank you for that extreme decision that you make if that's what's necessary. Your own mental health will thank you if that's what's necessary. Your physical health will thank you if that's what's necessary. Those extreme decisions, those extreme moments, those are the necessary things oftentimes to break free from addictions. And lust is an addiction. I'll talk about that here at the end, but it is an addiction. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, Paul says, run from sexual sin. He says, run from it. Run from it. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. We're just now starting to see the research about how sexual sin physically affects our health. What's crazy, though, is sex inside of marriage drastically improves our health. But outside of it, it drastically negatively affects our health. If you look at the story of Joseph, what does Joseph do whenever he encounters Potiphar's wife and she's like this cougar going, hey, I want some of you, boy. Come here. I have to keep it light because if not, you guys are like, this is too much. What does he do? He literally runs out of the palace. He's like, no, I'm out. Peace out. Done. I'm running. He runs, and Paul's going, hey, run. Run from this. Honestly, and maybe people in my life did when I was younger. Maybe there was leaders in my life that spoke this into me, and they were really blunt with me like I'm being with you today, and I just didn't listen to them, and I hope that you don't do the same thing. But I wish I would have listened to what they said. I didn't know the negative long-term effect that it would have on relationships, on my own health, on my own mental health. I didn't know what it would do. I just thought this was this teenage guy problem, not that big a deal. Everybody does it. It's not a big a thing. Everybody has these thoughts. Everybody goes through this season. Eventually you get married and you grow out of it. It's no big deal. And the reality is that's not the case. Marriage doesn't fix your lust problem. It doesn't. And some of you, you've lived that hell and you know it doesn't. It doesn't fix it. The only thing that fixes it is us removing access, understanding God's design, and beginning to confess at the thought level and going, hey, this is a serious thing that I'm not going to let Satan control me in. I'm going to pursue a pure mind. I'm going to pursue self-control. I'm not going to keep pursuing lust. Remove access. But when we remove access, if you're going to remove the habit, you got to replace it with something else. And Psalms tells us, how do we beat this? How do we replace this? In Psalms 119:11, we think of this as a cute little kid verse, but the reality is that this applies to our lives when it comes to our mental health and our mental thoughts. In Psalms 119:11, he says, I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. In other words, if I remove lustful thoughts, I have to replace it with memorizing God's word so that I won't go back to those lustful thoughts. And if you're wondering, like, where do I start with that? Let me just say, just get on the Bible app, search verses about lust or verses about self-control, start memorizing them. Post them all over your car, your home, wherever. You might not want to post them where everyone that walks in your house is going to see them, but post them up, in appropriate places. Your friend comes over and they're like, why do you got all these random verses about sex around your house, But post them where that you see them, and you're able to start memorizing, like, hey, God's giving me a spirit of self-control. That the Holy Spirit can produce self-control in my life. Go to Galatians 5 and write down the fruit of the Spirit and put it somewhere in your house that the Holy Spirit can produce self-control inside of me. Once you remove that access, you got to replace it with God's word. Here's the thing, again, no shame this morning. This isn't like if you're struggling with this, I don't know who is and isn't, but if you're struggling with this isn't like you're so bad, I can't believe you'd ever do this. I'm really sorry that you're battling with this. There's a way out of it. If maybe you're going, man, legit didn't know. Our culture just says this is okay. It's not that big a deal. I didn't know it was a big deal until this morning. I'm hearing Aaron talk about it. Let me say, if that's where you're at, go look at it for yourself. Go search out the Word of God for yourself and try to determine, is this as big a deal as Aaron's making it? Is this something that I really need to be serious about shifting in my life? As we close out, I'm asking the musician to come back up with me. If we're going to win this battle with lust, we have to understand that sex is addictive. Again, created by God, but also addictive. And if we're going to understand that, we have to look at a couple things. Secular psychiatrists call what happens during sex mentally and in our minds and in our chemical makeup, they call it sex glue. And what they're referring to is the release of oxytocin in the body, which is the bonding chemical. Oxytocin gets released when we have sex. It gets released anytime that we have a newborn child, actually. It helps us bond to that child. It's what is released in our bodies to help us bond to another person. Well, what we know about it now from all the science that is out there is that what they refer to as sex glue, actually in the moment of sexual activity where climax is reached, this bonding hormone of oxytocin is released, and your brain bonds itself, all 5 of your senses bonds itself to all of your surroundings. That's why some of you still have an image in your head from when you were 12 years old. You can't remember what you ate for dinner last week, but you can remember that image. That's why we have insane addiction to people that we've had sexual encounters with. That's why we have addiction to pornography. Because mentally and physically, there's this bonding that happens with all 5 of our senses to our entire surroundings whenever we have this sexual encounter. And it actually causes our brain to rewire itself to build a pathway inside of our minds to be able to get to that place faster. Our brain's like, that's awesome. Go there quicker next time. That's addiction. If you've ever been involved in drugs or had an alcohol addiction or nicotine addiction or any kind of addiction, that's what's happening in your brain. There's this pathway being built every time that you do it that your brain can get to that place faster because it feels really, really good. And your brain's like, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. On the negative side of things, that's really scary. On the positive side of things, I want you to think about this. Why would God do this to us? Like, God, you're so cruel. Why would you do this to us? Think about this. God designed the fire to be inside the fireplace. If we don't chase down lust, and we don't chase down websites and images, and we control our thoughts when it comes to the people around us, we don't pursue sexual activity outside of marriage, and then one day we get married, and we walk into this marriage night together, have a beautiful wedding, start the honeymoon, we have sex for the first time. This glue, this bonding chemical, oxytocin, bonds you to that person forever. 2 become 1. That's the way the scripture puts it. 2 become 1. And in a moment, the person that you've just had this moment with becomes the person that your brain rewires, go back to them over and over and over again. And when you have the biggest fights of your life, and everything within you is like, I'm done, your brain's going, go back to them, go back to them, go back to them. And you have an incredibly strong emotional connection. On the flip side of that, duct tape is some sticky stuff. But if I go around and I stick this duct tape to a bunch of different people, it collects all kinds of things. And it's gross at that point. And over time, it starts to lose its stickiness. And then when you try to stick it to the thing that you want it to stay to, you want it to stay against, it has a really difficult time staying against it. And when it comes to sexual encounters, what secular psychiatrists call sex glue, God intended it to bond us together with our spouse, But if we're not careful and we use it outside of that context, over time, it loses its stickiness. It loses its bonding capability because our brains are wired to want variety. Because we've wired them that way. Because we've lusted after all the different things that we've lusted after. And we've just created that in our heads over and over and over again. And then we have a really difficult time sticking it out in marriage. And some of you are here, you're like, Aaron, I've built plenty of fires outside of the fireplace, but now I'm trying to live for Jesus. What do I do now? Let me say, God can still forgive you. Remember, we confess, God forgives us. And God can still heal you if you'll confess to a few trusted people in your life. God can still heal you. And those two things are still available to us today. But if you're on the side of going, man, I don't really know this is really that big a deal, let me just say, I would challenge you. Don't take my word for it. Go look at what the Bible says about it. And then if you want to go look at some secular studies on it, feel free. There's so much out there scientifically now that we know that when we chase lust, so many negative effects. But when we do it God's way, when we provide the fire in the fireplace, inside of the context of marriage between a husband and a wife, it is beautiful, it is comforting, it provides the necessary needs that need to be met. It's incredible. So today we're going to replace lust with self-control. I ask you to bow your heads with me. The way we're closing out today is the way we close out almost every week. If you're here today and this has been a battle in your life, which based on statistics, the majority of the room, this has probably been a battle in your life, then the way we're going to end is by repenting for lust. We're just going to say to God, God, I'm sorry for lusting. I'm sorry for not taking these thoughts captive. Will you forgive me? And in a moment, God forgives us. In a moment, he forgives us. But repentance isn't just confession. Repentance is turning away from and not doing that any longer, which is going to require you to remove some access. It's going to require you to shift your understanding of God's design for sex. It's going to require you to unlearn some things and relearn some things. It's going to require some changes to not go back to it. And so today, we're repenting. We're asking God to forgive us. Then we're also making a change, a turn to go the opposite direction, to flee from or to run from all sexual sin. All sexual sin. And so I want us to close out today by asking the Holy Spirit to give us self-control, to cultivate. The Galatians tells us that the fruit of the Spirit, the self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. Fruit has to be grown. It doesn't just appear. And so we're going to pray that the Holy Spirit would cultivate and grow self-control inside of us today. So that way we can have more control over the moments. We can have better wisdom on removing access ahead of time, so that we can have the honest conversations that need to be had ahead of time, so that we can confess because we realize this is a self-control moment. I need to confess this. We're going to ask the Holy Spirit. So as I pray, I want you to just posture yourself there where you're sitting and to say, Holy Spirit, will you cultivate and grow self-control in me? As I pray today, whether you need to confess or you need to ask the Holy Spirit for self-control, I'm going to ask you to take that step and do one of those two things. God, we love you. And God, today, we confess that, God, the truth is the majority of this room, including myself, is something that we have to guard ourselves against. Lust is such a real thing in our culture. It's fed to us on a regular basis. And God, when these moments happen, I pray that we would confess them at a thought level. God, that we wouldn't let them become an action. God, I pray that today you would cultivate and grow self-control inside of every one of us. That, God, we would be people who replace lust in our lives with self-control. That, God, the things we say and the things we watch and the things we talk about and the things that we allow into our feeds, God, they would look different than everyone else because we're practicing self-control. God, we love you and we thank you today. In Jesus' name, amen.